Morning.
Morning.
Okay. Okay, welcome to the next special task force. We'll just go around, just do the introductions again. So, for any of the new viewers, they know who we are. I'm Leonard McLaren. I'm the interim director. Got a winged reading.
I'm Carol Locke, teacher at Marshall.
Jim Albanese, principal, Focus Point.
Mike Costello, parent of a second grader.
Don Short, parent of 2.
Judy McKinley, Special Ed Instructional Assistant at Field Elementary and President of the Los Angeles Learning Disabilities Association.
Jean Beanogle, general ed teacher at Field.
Susan Go, special ed teacher at Roosevelt.
Ruth Ann All, SLIPA at Sierra Madre Elementary.
Kathy Batista, special education teacher at Don Benito.
Garrett Newsom, principal of Sierra Madre Middle School.
Leanne Brown, community member.
Dr. Sean Service, community member.
Warren Skidmore, parent and CAC member.
Pam Allen, teacher specialist, special ed department.
Herman Barredo, parent, special needs parent, and past CAC chair.
Who am I? Sharon Harvey, facilitator. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm like halfway through a really, really large cup of iced coffee, so I'm ready to go.
Ready to go.
Thank you so much for being here on this wonderful Saturday morning. It is a beautiful day. We have quite a bit to do, and so we are actually going to just jump right in. Anyone that comes in, we'll just kind of bring them up to speed, but again, we have a lot to do today. There's an amazing assortment of refreshments over here. We have Subway, we have bagels, we have pastry. If anyone actually wants, there's fruit, there's water, there's coffee, there's just lots. So if anyone starts to feel their energies waning just a little bit, come on over, grab some carbs, grab some sugar. I didn't say it was the healthiest, but grab some carbs, grab some sugar, something to keep you going. And if at 1:05 the energy dip comes, that's fine, because we'll be done. You can go on home, take a lovely Saturday afternoon nap in the Pasadena sun. Okay? Alrighty, so as I said, we have quite a bit to do today. Don't talk about the caffeine. The caffeine is good. Oh, none today, Sean. None today. Alrighty. One of the first things we want to do is, of course, the review of the minutes. So I know that many of you have already started with reading them, but if you'll go ahead. Poor Leonard today, his voice is almost gone. So I know that he has wise and wonderful things to say. We just may not be able to hear them. So that means we'll just have to make certain that Leonard uses his microphone today. All righty, so let's go ahead and review the minutes.
I would like to thank Leonard for putting headers on all the pages. That is very helpful.
Yes, yes.
And thank you for working late into the night on this.
Yeah.
What our parents said to the minutes.
Yeah. I want to say that every member of the team has offered suggestions, recommendations to make it better for the entire task force. And Leonard and, again, everyone involved has tried to do their very best to incorporate the recommendations, the suggestions, the solutions, the constructive criticism. So, that's what a team and a task force does. You come together for a common cause, and just done an incredible job of doing the best to incorporate those good things that we're all looking for, and to make it easier and make our time more productive. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm stealing this one. This is my clean set. How are we doing? Who needs more time? Okay.
Actually, it's not that bad.
I see a couple of corrections.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay. Once everyone is done reading, we'll walk through. We have just a few more people reading, still reading.
Don't wait for me. I read here.
Okay. Anyone else need more time? Great.
So what were some of the corrections?
Okay, on page 3, in the section, first of all, my name is misspelled here. It's correct on the attendance. When I mentioned the three prongs that are used as a test in special education, the third one is behavioral, not personal or character development.
Academic, social, and behavioural.
Behavioral, right. And then the second correction I have is page 6, and this is actually attributed to Dr. Inouye. It says direct instruction is a means to implement instruction, and some of our staff have been trained in it. I know that all of our elementary staff have been trained in direct instruction. So I think the word some kind of minimizes how deeply, how many people are involved in providing
some
direct.
others, apart from, we're supposed to have some others apart from the elementary school staff training.
I'll defer to Garrett to speak.
Well, one of the things that we were talking about in direct instruction is definitely a strategy that's employed in every classroom across the district. I think one of the things that we talked about, though, is I believe elementary teachers have had access to a much more expansive professional development opportunity, more so than the middle school. We haven't been as consistent with that. So to me, it's more about consistency of approach as opposed to lack of a strategy in place.
Whereas in elementary, it's definitely consistent, and all the teachers have been trained, and they've been supervised to make certain that they are providing direct instruction. For instance, open court is direct instruction.
Okay.
Actually, my question was regarding the particular program that was addressed in that document that we were to read for homework. It looked like it was some kind of what do I want to say? Like you would have a program that you would buy. That was my question, not about particularly direct instruction. I understood what that meant. I just thought possibly that was a program that could be purchased because it was addressed in a couple of the school districts that we read about.
Okay. Ruthann?
I had a comment, too, to please whoever is taking the minutes to sign their names so that we know to who to credit. If, respectfully submitted by Warren or, because Leonard got the benefit. I also I'm Ruthann All. I have a correction on page 6 where it talks about Warren read group 3. I believe Don read group 2. And on page 5, in the large paragraph GB towards the bottom, the sentence starting with pace should be place, and the next sentence, limit the roles, ROLES, and underneath that, overlapping ROLES.
I've got lost. Could you rewind?
Let's start with the in the large paragraph on page 5.
Large paragraph, page 5 starts GB.
Yeah.
About halfway down, the first word in the sentence is pace. It should be place, P-L-A-C-E. And then the next sentence, we should not limit the roles, R-O-L-E-S. And underneath that, overlapping roles, R-O-L-E-S. It's just a homophone, and
I think they were hungry at the time.
yes. Yeah, it wouldn't work.
No.
And then also, I apologize, on the bottom of page 6, the last sentence, there's a question mark, somebody who sat next to Don. Do they remember who they were?
Stephanie Cozy.
Oh, it's Stephanie Cozy. Thank you.
Question on page 7, halfway down. Jennifer, is it whole harmless or hold, H-O-L-D?
I believe it's hold.
Hold. Okay.
H-O-L-D.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Any other corrections?
Do we give Warren a little space since he is not American speaking English?
I hypothesise with an S.
And we absolutely appreciate what you're doing. Yes.
Is there
Yeah,
a motion to approve?
I have
It's a silly error, but on page 2, I believe that it was Louise Bell, not Brown.
Oh,
Yes.
Then again, I wasn't here, so I'm just guessing.
Herman?
Warren, yeah, thank you for doing these minutes. On page 7, nearly all the way down, when we were talking about Avison's pulling out of the SELPA umbrella, and I asked how much we were spending, and then I also followed up with a question if we knew why they were pulling out. And so I'd like that reflected in the minutes, that no one, I don't remember anyone responding from the district why they thought, but my understanding, I'd like this reflected, is that they are able to hire whoever they want, irrelevant of a seniority list. That's my understanding, is that instead of having people sent to them to serve the
With their new
that's
connection?
well under the SELPA,
When they were with Pasadena.
yes, as a charter school, they get their separate funding, but the funding for special ed was staying at the district, and so now they pulled it out because the relationship wasn't working. That's why somebody would pull out. But they pulled out, is my understanding, because they could hire whoever they want. They're not bound by a personnel commission that this district is. We have layers of bureaucracy. Talk about obstacles. So we have lists of people that we need to go down. Number person 3, then person 4, and so you have to. Those people need to fail before. So, anyways, I didn't say that in detail at the last meeting. Maybe this meeting can, when you write the minutes for this meeting, you can say that. But
Post-meeting, no.
yeah, but it was, I didn't see it reflected. I think it's an important statement that I made at the last meeting that need to be in the minutes.
Does anyone know what SELPA they have joined up with? Oh, okay.
It's a different. It's not just LACO.
It's the LACO
charter.
CHELPA.
CHELPA. As they
It's
call it.
last year
a SELPA was created in Los Angeles County Office of Education to cover charter schools within Los Angeles County. And so for the past year and a half, they've been actively going through and seeking charter schools to join that SELPA. And it's because charter schools have a different service model. Generally, they do not have a full continuum of services. They have very specific students that they traditionally serve. And so the CHELPA was organized to address those specific needs. And as to the reason for a charter choosing that over Pasadena, I wouldn't even speculate on their.
It does seem to be, though, a common occurrence, because I know of some charter schools up north that have joined the SELPA's also created their own charter school SELPA. So maybe that's just a kind of the direction a lot of charter schools are going in, so they have more control over their programming.
Many of the charter schools in LA Unified, I went to a meeting not too long ago, were actually part of a SELPA that is like outside of Sacramento. So it does not even have to be geographically within the same area as to where the charter school is, which obviously somebody is getting a whole lot of money for them doing that.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to pass the minutes as corrected?
So move.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Great, thank you. If you will turn to page 9. Page 9. We had homework. Our homework was to review the assigned priorities of the audit recommendations based on the results of our polling that we did several meetings back. And I shared with you that the horizontal colors were basically my attempts to create groupings, but by no means am I the subject matter expert. But I needed you to take a look at what those groupings are, and let's do our best to prioritize those recommendations, which we've done, but to regroup them based on, what will allow us to create a more comprehensive plan for those particular areas. Before we do that, I want us to basically just kind of very quickly go back and take a look at what the Pasadena Board of Ed has said they want the Special Ed Task Force to do. Each of you has a document. It's called PUSD Board of Education Meeting. And then I've written it on chart paper over there. I personally think that mine is a little prettier, but these are the comments from the Board of Ed regarding the Special Ed Task Force. Priority is detailed action plans. Need for visioning of programs going forward. Improve student achievement in a cost-efficient manner. Needs to be a real working committee that's going to generate specific recommendations. And again, you have all this in your handout. Look at surrounding districts and how they're using their resources. Need to be an accountability loop. Collective bargaining agreement, any best practices out there, differentiated pay, duties, classifications, inclusion policies and practices. Definition is one thing, how to achieve and what is required is another. Addressing the dramatic rise of the general fund contribution. 70% is loss of revenue, and we heard that the other night from Joyce when she reviewed the budget. Be innovative, focus on revisioning what we need to do for special ed for all students. Look at resources, not in the context of our current confines, but how we can be more effective with our resources, not more efficient. Difference between effective versus efficient. Envisioning how things can be done differently. The role of CHIME and reviewing that school. And I believe that Herman actually brought CHIME information on Wednesday night, which he shared with us as well. Their definition of inclusion, I believe. What I would like for you to do is, as we move forward, I want you to bear in mind that our goals are tied in here. Many of us have asked, well, what does the board feel about it? What does the board think? Well, this is what the board has said, and this is what the board thinks. And basically what they've said is, we want the special ed task force to give us direction on what the recommendation should be. So there you have it. It's kind of a summary of what your charge is. I know we had a 3-page document, but there we have it again, just to remind us of why we're here and what we're here to do, and the incredible importance and value of the work that you're doing has. I know that the expenditure of time, the expenditure of resources, you may start to ask yourself, okay, why are we here? What are we doing? A reminder, that is why you're here, and this is why you're doing it. And I've said this once or twice, but you are literally creating the legacy for special ed going forward. This is the beginning of cultural change for special education in Pasadena Unified. Are there any? Yes.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. What I thought I just heard you say is that the board is looking to us for the direction, correct? So in essence, whatever we tell them we think should be done is going to be done?
I cannot say that whatever you tell them will be done. I'm saying that the recommendation is going to be highly valued and reviewed based on resources, et cetera, available. But it's up to you. This task force has the opportunity to prioritize.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know when to say this, or I don't want to be off topic, but in reviewing the minutes, and I did just mention a minute ago, there was, I guess, $700,000 in legal fees. Have we ever looked at where the majority of those lawsuits, what the content of those lawsuits are? Are there patterns of the same things being sued for over and over again? And if we could look at those patterns, I bet we could address those issues and save a significant amount of money by addressing what commonly occurs in lawsuits. $700,000 is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, can I say something? $700,000 might be a drop in the bucket compared to what the district would spend if they had to provide services. As some of you might know, in LAUSD, which has a much larger budget, they spend $50 million a year just on one-on-one aids outside of the school district. So I don't know what fraction that is in comparison to their full budget. What's their budget? $7 billion or $8 billion? And I don't know what their budget is, but $50 million is it's a chunk of money, and so relatively speaking, what would the expense be if we are to provide these services to people? I think there's people in the system, not only this system, but in many systems, that are sitting there doing a cost analysis saying, let's fight this, and then decide it in the hallway with attorneys, and then have the parents sign confidentiality on what service they're receiving, so it's not public.
I hear what you're saying. I would still be interested in seeing what the pattern is of lawsuits, because we could still address them. I mean, that's 10% of the special ed budget.
My thoughts on the board comments back here. To me, nothing will change unless special education is a priority of the Board of Education at the highest level. They're the ones that hire the superintendent. The superintendent is then in charge of directing everybody else that falls within the district. So January 31st, the Board of Education went on record, public meeting, visible to everybody, saying special education is a priority for us. We're convening this task force to make recommendations to change it, and not just in a very top-level way. These comments, to me, are very specific and very empowering. And so I think that's the first step. I think that this should empower us to really not just take a very summary look at everything, but really go deep. Personally, I was a little bit frustrated at the last meeting because I don't think we can accomplish what we have here by some of the things we did last week, meaning in terms of looking at optimal educational environments. I don't think we can achieve this by reading one 15-page report of 4 school districts and taking that summary and then using that to go forward as defining optimal educational environments. I think that's a good start, but I think we need to dig deeper and really talk to people at those districts, at those schools, and see what's not encapsulated by a 1-hour conversation with an interviewer. I think you bring up a good point in terms of the lawsuits. I think there's information that as we get forward and as we break into groups and subcommittees and so forth to attack these recommendations, I think we should be really vigilant in terms of asking for information that we need to do the job. So within the confines of confidentiality and everything else, I think looking at what have the lawsuits been, where have the legal costs been, is a very valid thing. I think one of my personal frustrations from last week was the financial discussion as well. There's no way we can get there with having a regurgitated report from 4 months ago that's been abridged. That's not looking at cost analysis, where resources are coming from, where they're going to. So all I say is with regards to this, I am motivated by this and really hope that all of us are to really dig deep and change the game, so to speak, as we move forward today and in successive meetings.
Sorry, Jim, then mine.
I'd just like to say I have 3 number 1s on this list. Need for visioning of programs going forward, inclusion of policies and practices, innovative focus on revisioning what we need for special education for all students. I think if we focus on the program elements that the board charged us with, the finances and the lawyers tend to take care of themselves. I think that 100% of the $700,000 all went to lawyers and none of it to kids. And that would be my issue with $700,000. Oh, it wasn't all, not just legal fees?
But
Okay.
I understand what you're saying, Jim, but I also think that, and this is Sharon offering an opinion, not the facilitator, that when you look at the reason that something was brought forward, it gives you an opportunity to review a practice or a policy to see if there is a trend, if there is a pattern, and then address it. I mean, this is why we have laws. Laws are not for 100% of the population. Laws are developed for roughly 10% of the population. So there's 10% of the population that, no matter what, may not observe a particular rule or guideline. So there's a law placed on the books so that you can point to that and say, this is the way we've agreed that we're going to do it. In this case, if you have a study, and it shouldn't take very long. I would hope that it wouldn't take very long. But we also have to be cognizant of the resources that we're calling on each time we ask for more data. So there's the cognizance of the resources needed to acquire the data that we want to look at, and then there's also, what the task force perceives as its need to actually review the data. So these have to be balanced. But a study, review of identification of trends, patterns, what those areas were, of course, keeping in mind the privacy issues that also are pursuant in that type of conversation, would probably lead to a possible change in procedure or policy. Yes.
Just as we reviewed the audits to see if there were patterns or duplications in each audit, it seems like it would go hand in hand with looking at any resources that are spent on something outside of the classroom. Why are those things being spent over and over again? And so, again, just merely to look at a pattern so we can put some level of remediation into place.
So can we go on record to say if the task force is requesting that information?
I believe you are.
Okay, so that's on record that we're requesting that information to be reviewed.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask
Thank
a
you.
question? Leonard, can you answer this? I know that lawsuits that are filed against the district, that the settlements are, what is the word? That they cannot be discussed by...
Sealed.
Huh?
They're confidential.
Sealed, okay. Does that also apply to the subject matter of those lawsuits? I would not think, being that there are no names involved, just the subject matter and what the lawsuits were about should be able to be brought to the table.
We've already been.
Right.
Right.
Hold on just a moment. Was there a response from Lynette?
Because there's actually, we are looking at basically looking at the trends. We're currently even doing it. Basically, it's not any specific disability. A lot of it's more as is compliance. People would ask for an assessment and it doesn't happen. And it's over and over. Or when people ask for IEPs and the school does not respond to it, having the IEP within 30 days. It's special ed 101 laws that keeps getting us in trouble because people are not following what they're supposed to be doing. And that's one reason we're really looking at it and really holding people more accountable. Because that's where we're having the problems. It's not any specific
Hold on.
issues.
We have here, and then back to Jim. And then we're going to try to get to our next activity, which is our goal for the day.
There's just a couple of things that I know from being here quite a long time and being involved in many different aspects of, from the complaint aspect to the due process aspect to the settlement aspect. And I would like to say that I never agree in a settlement to not discuss the issues related to the settlement. I think those sort of statements, but that's probably because I represented my son myself, but I never sued for money. My goal was never money. My goal was to try to get back the services that I felt my son was lost. And what I find is the older the child or student gets, the more it's going to cost to remediate it. I agree with Leonard about repetitiveness in issues. I know there are people in this room who I have filed repetitive complaints about, and they still do it year after year after year after year after year. And that costs you a lot of money. It costs you a lot of money. And last week we were given some numbers, and I went back and looked at some audits that I had, and I think I have all of them. And because I know how to read the codes, you have to realize that they don't always code what they're spending under the same way. So when somebody codes something a certain way, it's very difficult to tell that that was settlement money. There's also settlement money involved when you have somebody who they don't want to fight with because maybe they think it's going to be difficult, or maybe they think it's going to involve a lot of attorneys, and they decide to settle that way. I'm not passing judgment on any form of settlement, but I do believe if you start making programs more uniform and start taking seriously some of the complaints that you get, I see this as being way cheaper a process than what it is now. Now it will remain expensive, and it'll continue to be something that we all come back to every so many years wondering why. Because that's what I see in the studies. We come back every year going, well, what can we do to make this less? It doesn't seem like these aides are doing anything, or it doesn't seem like these people are doing anything. But the most interesting phrase up there is that addressing the dramatic rise of the general fund contribution. I don't know if you understand that IDA funds, to my understanding, cannot be used for lawsuits. They cannot be used at all for lawsuits. So when we're talking about money that's used to settle lawsuits, we're talking about general education funds. It's that number that makes a lot of parents dislike general education issues because they think it's taking money away. There really is something to that it takes money away from, but the reason is not always just the kid. It's the way that we're going about doing things. And we can do things really, I truly believe things can be done better. And I do think that the majority of the board is interested in doing them better so that this doesn't have to be like this forever.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Comment in the back and then here. If you'd like, you can have a seat at the table.
In a little bit.
Because they won't be able to hear you.
Just trying to gather we're just trying to get our bearings right now.
Okay.
The word lawsuit comes up and I hear this not only in this room, but I hear it everywhere. I think that in addressing these issues, they should be looked at as what they really are, which are due process and compliance complaints. That these aren't parents that are taking something from other children. They are actually parents that are fighting on behalf of children, and to wrongly assume that when these kinds of issues take place, that this is a specific parent looking out for their own well-being or the well-being of their own child is a fallacy. I can't speak for other parents that have been in crisis and in a disenfranchised position with the district. I can speak only for my own. However, I can say that we frequently find ourselves at odds with the district over issues that are, as Mr. McLaren said, 101 issues. These are basics. And when I was looking at some of the data, and I have a lot of questions about the high numbers of African American males that have been identified as ED. And I know that this is an issue that had already been covered, but this concerns me. And when we're talking about compliance and we're talking about the issues that come up, I don't see or hear a lot of discussion about Hughes Bill. I don't see or hear a lot of discussion about how these children are being identified as ED. What I do see is that the numbers don't line up. They don't match they don't match even within special education, but they don't line up with the dynamics of our cultures within the district. And it is my belief that if we take a good look at that, we're going to find that we've got a lot of children that are actually on the ASD spectrum that are being misidentified and labeled ED. And I think that this is something that should concern our communities, and this is something that should be examined. Now, I know that this is not the time or place to discuss it, but it is the time or place to discuss why the district ends up in the position where they have to defend themselves against statements like the one I just made. It's because there are trends that cannot be explained any other way. And there is no need to continue to use the language of lawsuits that take money away from children, and instead maybe address these for what they really are, which are compliance issues that address the needs of all of the children.
Thank you, thank you. And you'll be pleased to know that overreporting is one of the issues and the recommendations to be addressed. Mr. Albanese.
The Wall Street Journal about 3 years ago did a study on the reduction of legal costs for different states, and one of the states looked at was the state of California. And what the study found was what was attributed for the greatest reduction in legal fees was solid service models. And so if you have solid service models, like Ms. Watts said, your lawsuits reduce. And I think compliance is a good place to start, and focusing on the tasks that the board has charged us with to address those needs. I think looking at service models, having vision, and having a plan would go a very long way to addressing the needs of students.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I also would like to say that I agree with this gentleman back here. I think one of our biggest issues is the quality of assessments that are being done on students to identify their specific needs. And many times I have looked at a number of reports from outside quality assessors compared to district assessments. The outside assessors report absolutely is a picture of the student. And you look at the district's assessment, and that student doesn't even appear in that district assessment. And I think we desperately need to look at the quality of assessments that we're doing, because misdiagnosis is damaging to the kids, it's damaging to the district, it costs us money, and it's something that, in my opinion, is one of our top priorities. And of course, that goes for hiring quality assessors too.
Last statement.
The over-identification of some kids, I think, is, we look at it and it gets published, but I think more importantly, what I would want to know is what are the services that kids are receiving, because, if we have 60% of this district being or over being Latino, and they receiving maybe 10% of the services, as a Latino leader, I'm very concerned about that. As are the African American leaders on over-identification and also lack of services. But we're talking also about misdiagnosis of kids that are maybe, they speak a different language at home, and so then we put them into the wrong category. So I would want to look at services that are being provided. And then also, there was something else I wanted to say, and it escapes me right now, but I'm sure within the next 3 hours it'll come back to mind. I'll say it.
This is just what I meant. Just within the last 10 minutes, we've discussed everything from assessments to placement to programming to services to administrator training, compliance. That's what I'm talking about in regards to patterns. I mean, there are things that we can directly address, and we're going to get a lot of good info knowing what we've been called up to the carpet for before.
Good. I think we're all in agreement then. We know what we want to do. We know what we need to do with regards to that area. It's been indicated as an action item in the minutes, and we will move forward with that. This is what I need us to do now. From day one, actually before day one, when I first received the batches of recommendations from Leonard, and I actually took the time to read them all, emphasis on read them all, it became apparent to me that there were overlapping areas. We have been making steps to move towards identifying those overlapping areas and essentially putting us in a position to identify those major areas so that we can create comprehensive plans for those areas, those major areas. It's not that we don't want to have an inclusion plan for item 1.1, an inclusion plan for item 6.7, an inclusion plan for 8.9. We want to identify those main themes that are coming out at us through the recommendations, identify those main theme areas, and then look at what needs to be input in those areas to create those comprehensive plans. Everything that everyone has said this morning is, of value, incredible value. But we've got to be systematic in the approach. And the first step is for us to identify those overlapping areas so that we can take what was 10 audits of over 100 pieces of paper. We've now brought it down to 3 pieces of paper. We can refine even more so that we can begin having those conversations about the process for developing action plans. That is what we are going to do now. Now, I've thought for the last 2 days about the best way to do this, and I can't say that I've come up with the best way. I can only say that I've come up with a way for us to have this conversation. It cannot be as an entire group. So right now there are roughly 16, 17 people, in the room. I am going to ask you, I'm going to put you in groups of approximately 4, maybe 5. And then I'm going to have you to go, each group will go through the entire 3 pages. Each group go through the entire 3 pages. And I want you to group those recommendations into what seem to be related recommendations, and then come up with a common theme name. And then when the group comes together, we'll all see this is what we all believe should be there. Now, I'm not going to ask you to write out the entire recommendation. You've got your recommendations that you're going to group, your theme name. Use the little numbers, the numbers that I've given you. And all those tie back to an original recommendation. So, if we can, it is 10:15. I want us to take roughly a 5-minute break before we get started, because this next piece is probably going to take us about 30 to 45 minutes. So there won't be time for a break in between there. And then I want us to report out, and then after that, we'll take another break. So let's do a 5-minute break, restrooms, coffee, food, so that when you get in your group, you'll have all that you need to get through the next hour or so. All right? There'll be approximately 4. So right after the break, I'll move you into your groups.
Can
Mr.
I
Costello.
ask you which group of recommendations you're working with? I was so confused last night when I went to look at this that I wasn't positive which one was the one that we were supposed to be dealing with today. What does it start with?
It starts with, you have a document that says prioritized.
Yeah, I have them, only I have too many. Is it the one that starts with 9.3?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I could not figure out what
And
I
if
was
there's
doing.
anyone who does not have a handout, we have more copies up front.
I don't want to complicate what we're doing. Question though, as we're in groups grouping these, if something strikes us as something that we haven't seen before but we think is worthy of looking at, can we add it as an addendum? For example, maybe the whole issue of compliance at every school site. I don't know, but I'm just saying that conversations occur or observations occur by this group at this table that aren't necessarily captured in these overall recommendations. So having the ability to make an additional list that we can decide what to do with.
Absolutely. Just make certain that when your group reports out, that you state that this was not a part of the document, so that we can all be aware of that. We won't look for it here. Yes.
Compliance is all encompassing, and it is there under Section 504. That would really, I mean, compliance.
Sure, but there may be something else. You know, on our very first day, we discovered that there were some recommendations that were on. We had a summary document that we started with that actually were not. Some recommendations were not included in the summary document, so we actually moved those forward as well.
And kind of just
Then use it, and then you have specifics under that.
I'm sorry.
So if compliance is one that's looked at, then have what that would look like. Is that what
No,
compliance would look like?
this first activity is all the recommendations that will refer to compliance. That's what. And
okay, so group them.
yes,
Cluster them.
right. Cluster them. Exactly. All right, take your break. Time is a wasting. And I'm going to need more caffeine in a few minutes. to make certain that we all are clear on what we're going to spend the next 30 to 45 minutes doing. Volunteer, who's it going to be? Ruth.
We've been assigned to combine priorities from the document that's called Special Education Task Force Prioritized Consolidated Audit Recommendations. So, for example, even though they have been delineated by numbers and by audit, there are duplications. So we are trying to reform in a more concise document those areas of priority.
Very good. I'm not asking you to restate anything. I just want you to create a grouping using those recommendation numbers and then give them a theme name. If it's inclusion, anything related to inclusion with the number underneath. If it's curriculum, if it's transitioning, it's just that simple. The conversation will be identifying all those in the list and finding a home for them. If there's something that it just doesn't have a place and it just stands alone, then you need to identify again a theme name for that particular area. All righty? Yes.
Are we doing 9.3, 8.1, and the whole, are we looking at this whole list of 3 pages?
Yes.
Okay.
Each group is looking at all 3 pages.
Okay.
Yes. And the professional development, those have been grouped pretty decently because after day 1, the group identified there was a lot of professional development. But there may still be a few stragglers out there. Mike.
And just to remind everybody, one of the audits we felt, a lot of people have felt, was a lot of the recommendations that came from that audit weren't necessarily things that we would recommend as a task force to go forward. So I would suggest that rather than the final list including all of these but just regrouped, I would think that it would be our responsibility to remove those that we don't think apply to the direction going forward.
Yes. Yeah, what were you saying?
I would say change it to the opposite. If you think if it's a reduction, it should increase, then that maybe something is an area we need to be looking at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all the audit was for, was cost reductions.
I would suggest that rather than delineate anything, that it be just not recommended at this time, or put it in a parking lot. I think everything needs to be documented that it was acknowledged as being appropriate or acknowledged as not being appropriate. But I agree with Mike. I think there are some things.
What I'll do is I'll bring each group a separate sheet for you to indicate as a parking lot item. Or do we want to call it parking lot? Do we want to call it not appropriate? Parking lot. And then just move it to the parking lot, okay? And then Leonard did want to make a statement before we moved on.
Expired file. The sponge file. For the 504, that's one thing that has been addressed by the district about 2 years ago. Actually, as I came on, they did a whole district-wide training on 504, creating a whole policy. That was because of a result of an OCR violation. So every single school actually has a 504 coordinator or person that's in charge of 504. We also have a district 504 coordinator, and that's Sonia Ridarte, who is the director of child welfare, attendance, and safety. So if you even go on the website, on Pasadena USD's website, go to departments, and if you look under child welfare, you'll actually find some of the stuff on 504s. So that actually has been heavily addressed.
Having them available and to parents and having them actually respond and being accessible to parents are 2 different things. So while these are great things to.
But a 504 is a general ed function, not a special education function. So it's kind of inappropriate for us to.
But if we're, I understand that. But
Hold on.
Can you speak in the mic? That way
Yeah, you have to.
If we're discussing, and I understand that. However, if we're discussing moving towards inclusion in any way, the coordination between the 504, the 504 contact person, and even a parent of a special education student needs to be acknowledged by that coordinator. The reason being that these issues aren't specific to general or to special education. These are all encompassing. So I'm not really, I understand that that's what that they feel their role is, but the more that we draw these lines of definition and say that this is where this person's job begins and ends, then what we're doing is we're again compartmentalizing to such a point that there's not going to be any fluidity, and we've got to have some sort of fluidity between special education, general education, even through this 504 person, in order for that to occur.
Yeah, collaboration.
Because there's got to be a dialogue
Yeah,
there.
collaboration has to be there, but there's more general ed than there are special ed.
Right, but there's a lot of general
enforce
education
something.
children that are receiving 504 services that aren't receiving them. There also is that bridge where there are tons and tons of children that could receive 504 services, but it is being looked at as being actually something else.
Let me make this suggestion. The group tell me if you agree. Again, as a facilitator, I don't tell you what to do. It's just let me put it out there. Do we have a category that says 504 compliance?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
No. We're talking about developing comprehensive plans. Okay? There's going to be detail that eventually appears, but we're talking about developing comprehensive plans. So this is why I go back to using the example of transition, which is one, again, that popped out at us at the very first day. We don't want to develop a transition plan that only addresses K-1. We don't want to develop a transition plan that only addresses elementary school to middle school. We want to develop a comprehensive transition plan and then hit those areas underneath and within that one plan. Okay? So we're all on the same page? Yes. Excellent. It is 10:30. 11 o'clock is our end time on this activity. So you're going to need to talk fast, drink lots of coffee, have a fast writer, and I'm going to put you into groups of 4. It's going to be very easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mr. Skidmore will join this group. 1, 2, 3, 4 to here. 1, 2, 3, 4 to Judith. And 1, 2, 3. Are we missing someone? Okay, when Don returns, he's a part of your group. And do you want to join a group today?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, this one is kind of parent heavy. We're looking for balance. We want to have balance of opinion. Here. Yes. Let's go here. That's a parent. No, I just anointed you. All righty. Group. We have one group. No, right here. This will be great.
I'd say if not by face, then by name.
You'll be in the group with Leanne. You'll be in the group with Leanne right here. I know you're strangers, I know. So we have one group that's here. Go ahead and move your chairs. We have group that's there. We have our third group that is back there in the corner and our fourth group that's here. You have until 11 o'clock. I'll be circulating. If you have any questions, stop me. If I'm not in your area and you have a question, just come and grab me. I'm sorry. Everyone, let's come back together. You need to identify a spokesperson. Identify a spokesperson. Yes, please. Thank you. Where'd it go?
It was over here. So we need to run outside. Doesn't make sense.
Okay. Has every group identified a spokesperson? Every group has identified a spokesperson. Did every group make it through all 3 pages?
Yes.
I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. Okay, this is good for my self-esteem. So, we are going to begin with sidebars. Sidebars. Thank you. We're going to begin with making a list of all the categories that were created. If you hear a category that your group has put forth has already been stated, then I'd want you to skip that one. So we're going to begin by sharing the categories that were created. For instance, that group has transition, PD collaboration. That's a fairly large grouping. PD, collaboration, culture, and community involvement. You guys need a little more time? Okay, so while they're making adjustments, everything needs refining. We're going to start again with initially sharing your categories. If the group following that group hears a category has already been stated, I want you to just not say it. That way we can avoid repetition. You can say, this topic has already been said, but we just want to avoid repetition in our in our list. So let's start here. Spokesperson? You.
Talk loud.
Will it reach?
Oh, yeah, that 200-foot.
I think I can just read from here. I don't think I need to stand by it.
Okay.
Okay, we said access to the core curriculum, collaboration, evidence-based practices, which I think is really key and should be the core of any of our special ed programs, compliance monitoring, transitions, inclusion, RTI, and parents. And we also had a parking lot and a standalone group.
Mm-hmm. The first step is just identifying the categories. Professional development, we've got inclusion. RTI. Parking lot.
What's standalone refer to?
Standalone was when there was an issue that didn't fall under any category. So it was kind of like the lone wolf.
Okay.
The 4.2 was the pay schedule and stipends for speech therapists. No, I'm sorry, that's 4.2. That's 6. No, yeah, that's 4.2. And 5.1
Parents.
was the restructure of central office organization structure. Just didn't think that those were within the scope of this. That was part of the discussion that we've still been having, was trying to figure out what that was. And what we surmised that the district does not have a percentage or a stipend percentage on top of salary to hold on to the speech language pathologists in the district. Is that correct? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, if you don't mind my sharing, the district that I work in the district I work in, we do have that, and it has been very effective in holding on to speech pathologists. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the concept of differentiated pay.
Right. my understanding is that they're on a straight salary, and that so it is a specialized area. And so if you want to hold on to, in an area where there's competition, if you want to hold on to,
Sure.
if you want to hold on to the
best and
speech
your
language
brightest, yeah.
pathologist, then the idea is to make the job more appealing by adding that on. And that was what that was in regards to. But we just didn't know where to cluster that because it really didn't fall within.
We're
this
both
scope.
4.2 and 5.1 related
Looking
to that
for
topic?
5.1 had to do with the central office. Again, restructuring the central office is not something that, that can be handled, that could be handled at this,
Okay.
in this, is that?
Yeah, but that's why the standalone category.
Gotcha.
We just didn't know where to, we didn't know where to put it.
No, thank you for
So,
clarifying.
we're not saying that they're not important issues, they're not, and that they're, just don't know where they go.
Yeah, thank you.
Not even a parking lot, it's just.
All righty, our group here, who's our spokesperson?
All right, we had administration. We had administration, staff, which accompanied collaboration.
I'm sorry.
It was collaboration, so that was duplicated. Then we had compliance, which is duplicated.
Before you go on, okay, we have administration and staff.
Right.
Okay, and then
Compliance.
under staff, you had collaboration?
No, that 6.5 is collaboration. Those are just the notes.
Okay.
Compliance. We had curriculum and classroom. Is that? Professional development is duplicated. And parking lot. And then we also had an area that we had designated as, I guess it would be in the standalone, where we have CAC. It was a 2.2, and that was developing information that we felt was more parent. If it was a parent information, it should come from maybe parenting centers at the school site.
So
it'll fit into the
the parents area. Okay, let me repeat: administration, staff, collaboration, curriculum, and classroom. Those were your areas.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay.
This group.
See which one
You have collaboration twice? No, you want to put it in different colors, right?
No, actually, it shouldn't have been repeated.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize.
Just checking.
Yeah, and I was just writing, so.
That's okay.
Thank you. You're very comforting. This group.
So our big buckets were.
I'm sorry, different color. Someone got a purple?
I got a green.
No, here's a purple. This is the color I'm looking for. All righty, now go ahead, Mike.
So our big buckets were special ed director at cabinet level. Basically, we interpreted that to be anything at an ELT, whether it's or above. So board, superintendent, all of those issues.
Okay.
Hence the standalone one from over there. Pre-K. Homeschool every school, and we interpreted that to be inclusion and continuum services.
Okay, can we go with inclusion?
Well, no, because I think that, as evidenced in previous conversations, inclusion doesn't cover the whole spectrum of what we want to do. So it's about, if we're going to have homeschool at every school, we need to look at providing consistency of services throughout.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Providing consistency of services.
So consistent services.
No?
It is. It's just that wanting to make sure that the end result is homeschool,
All right, good.
every school.
Gotcha.
504. We thought we were going to have that with every group, but nobody else has mentioned that yet.
That compliance, though, we put ours under compliance.
That is compliance.
Okay. Safe way is say qualified staffing and hiring.
Is it okay if we list staffing and yeah, we have staff here. Ruth, would your group be okay if instead of just staff, we put staffing and hiring?
Sure.
That encompasses the needs of both groups? Okay.
And then you got a place for that.
You already have a bunch of things. So access to core curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
You have that? Okay, great. Assessments.
Right, put the speech teachers into that category, right?
This is purple for assessment.
Yeah, that's it.
Evidence-based practice wouldn't be that.
Would that be evidence-based practices?
No.
Okay, I've got one person at a time. Evidence-based practices.
Okay, I'm sorry, I disagree in that in training programs for assessors, school psychologists, LCSWs, clinical people, there is evidence-based practice around assessment also, that you use the appropriate assessments to measure the appropriate need.
Okay,
So
let me make this, preface this statement. In looking at the statement from the board this morning, look at resources, not in the context of our current confines, but how we can be more effective with our resources. Would it be an effective use of resources to develop a comprehensive plan around evidence-based practices that includes how assessments are used?
I would say yes.
My interpretation would be that we should be using evidence-based practices to implement all of these things, but the goal is, in this particular case, making sure that students are assessed right and then fit into the system accordingly.
So it sounds like the group is, yes, Monica.
Especially for autism, there are not a lot of evidence-based practices, and they change sometimes every 6 months on what is exactly an evidence-based practice. In addition, a lot of times psychologists will use evidence-based testing, but because of the nature of the disability, they will not start out with a baseline or use it in the same fashion to get information. I don't know if a lot of people know this. Pam, you know about that.
I wanted to also share and I do hear that with a test such as the SIP test, which is
Sidebars.
The SIP test, which is something that it isn't used for children after the age of 9. If we have a child that's been constantly labeled as something else, as having behavioral challenges, having behavioral issues, and this child's been really the way that his behavior has been handled for 9 years has been related around his behavior. When we find out at the age of 10, actually, the issues are on the ASD, and they have to do with the way that he inputs information, how he's taking in sensory information, or she's taking in sensory information. Then there is no assessment there. So we do have to be careful how we look at that. I agree.
Okay, so we're, in order to not overlook a population,
which is happening a lot. I'm just going to put it out there.
Evidence-based assessment and evidence-based curriculum? Because in my mind, those are two different things.
And they're both really important.
And they're both really important.
Okay, evidence-based assessment and evidence-based
practice. You can't have an evidence-based
So
practice
evidence-based
without,
and then maybe have two subcategories?
one person at a time.
I'm sorry.
Sean.
you cannot have an evidence-based intervention without an evidence-based assessment. So it just goes hand in hand. There's really no argument.
Okay.
Right.
Evidence-based practices and assessments. Understand, keep in mind, we are trying to create a comprehensive picture. by separating them, we're actually treating them as though they would be separate. Okay, so once again,
The word including?
First, because assessment has to come first.
absolutely.
Or based on evidence-based assessment?
Assessment /
Practices.
practices. Does this allow us to remove anything else from our list?
Yeah, the evidence-based practices above.
Wow, you guys are staying with me. Thank you. All righty.
And the last one, it wasn't on this, but from previous conversations of this task force, ESY, we thought.
I'm sorry.
Extended school year wasn't on
Extended
this list of recommendations, but from previous conversations of this task force, we thought it should be added.
All right. Based on what we have here, are there any other areas, and I realize I'm in your way, Leonard, are there any other areas that could be or have overlap enough to be one area? I'm sorry, there was a hand?
Well, we didn't discuss.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry.
Ours are up there.
And-
I don't know if we focused.
Yeah, there was culture that was referenced.
Yeah, we
took culture out because we found that culture was under our other categories of collaboration and or community involvement.
so we made it a separate classification, but we think, at least we did. Yeah, we think it encompasses
other.
almost the global picture of the school. You know, the culture at the district and the culture at the school, and it's very important in all the implementation of everything.
Yes.
In just thinking about this a bit, there's access to the core curriculum. We also have RTI, and we also have curriculum and classroom. RTI, of course, is a tiered level curriculum or intervention, not necessarily attached to special ed.
It's not special ed.
It's not necessarily attached to special ed. However, we do realize that many special educators are assisting with RTI programs.
Okay.
Therefore, would RTI fall into one of the other areas, either access or that access and RTI all falling into evidence-based practices? Because that is where RTI originated from, was using appropriate evidence-based practices would reduce the numbers of children entering into specialized programs.
Okay. Is there another one? You said access to core curriculum
And RTI.
and RTI. Okay. Anything else?
I think you can consolidate. I think administration and special ed director cabinet level are getting to the same thing
We in agreement?
in terms of just define. I would say define administration as Board of Education, superintendent, and ELT.
But was administration up there because of that, or because they required administrative training around special education policies and procedure? I don't know why administration was listed. It's a question.
Well, that's an excellent question, because if it was posted because of the basis of your question, that would be professional development. Yes.
When we first started advocating for that at the board level, it would be about 5 years ago, that the special ed director be part of the administration. It was under a different superintendent who tended to be more isolated with everyone than the last two we've had. So I don't really know if that's necessarily, if the information is trickling down, like the financial information, if it really is and this is something that us parents wouldn't know. This is something you teachers and administrators would know. If the information is trickling down so that it's fairly it's fairly distributed where everybody understands why they have whatever amount of money they have to deal with their programs and develop everything in a timely fashion, then I can see how it could be the same thing. But at the time, that was not going on. And so we always felt that maybe if the person was in the room when things were being discussed, then we wouldn't have to worry about the trickle-down theory, or I didn't know about this, or thanks for telling me that happened at a board meeting, or I didn't know they decided that. And that used to go on a lot. So I don't know how things are going now.
Thank you for that
Teachers maybe
context,
know.
though.
My interpretation with regards to this category is that, again, nothing will happen at school sites and in classrooms unless it comes from the top. So there needs to be direction, there needs to be part of our special education plan that tackles the issue of the board, the superintendent, and the ELT, in my opinion.
Okay.
So-
And the belief is that this provides that access.
Monica has lost sight of years, I think. We've been fighting for that for 15 years or 20 at least,
Right.
to have the special ed director on the administrative.
I meant when a
the
group of 10 of us would show
superintendent's
up.
cabinet, okay? And most school districts do, so it's ridiculous.
But we appreciate the context for that, but the goal, we're still trying to tie back to the group that initially has administration on their list as a category. What was the thinking around that for the group?
Well, I think it was the hierarchy that above staff, which is, those in the classrooms and at the school site, that there is the administration, meaning, as Mike described, the Board of Education administrators here at District Ed Center, directors, and
Let me recommend, you tell me if this would be appropriate. We stick with the administration as a category, but we move this as one of those items underneath administration.
That sounds good.
And I think, to continue this conversation, I think the fact that we have a new special ed director coming in now would be a wonderful opportunity to have Mr. Gundry, who is himself a new superintendent, to make the decision to include this new director as part of his cabinet. And Leonard, I don't know, you may have some feelings on that. Have there been continued discussions or any discussions at all?
About adding the level to the cabinet, not that I've been aware of, but the one thing that we have been doing, or actually I've been doing for a number of months, is working more collaboratively with the different other departments, because that's what's a lot of it. What it is, it's just going down there and talking to them. Like, for instance, Mr. Miller and I, we've been actually since October having weekly meetings just to look at staffing, so we can get a lot of the staffing in order. And at the same time, here and there, I'm trying to get down to the business services to talk with finance, so we can get that a little bit more organized as well. But it just takes the time and that effort, and that's it's going to take a process. I mean, it's time. So things are moving that route, but that part I haven't heard.
Are we defining the administration? I'm kind of hearing this, that the administrator, and I don't know if I'm getting this right or not, but that the administrator sets the stage for what's going to happen in the district or school. Therefore, they have to be on board in a collaborative effort with the parents, CAC, this task force, in order to set a charge of what direction their school or the district's going to go in, versus administration not knowing certain special education laws or requiring training. So there's two different areas. I'm still uncertain of where this administrative category is. Is it about training, or is it about like that setting of the stage, or is it both?
Monica?
Yeah, I never felt it was, now I may be different from everyone else in the room, but I never felt, in all the years I've been here, and it's probably been 15,
More,
Judy, more. But I never felt that it was a matter of people not knowing what was right or what was wrong. But something was happening where either financially or somebody would make a decision that would throw a ringer in it, and then it wouldn't get done properly. And so for that reason, I guess what I had always hoped was that if the person was in the room, then they'd be better able to identify. But if they're still not able to do what they want, what is necessary, it wouldn't make much difference either way. I don't know how to fix that. I don't, other than to try putting the person in the room. That was our hope.
What I'm hearing from the group is everything that everyone has said seems to be pointing towards accountability.
Right, right.
Having a representative that can, one, be an advocate for the needs, but also, you know, one of the things, again, over there, the board said needs to be an accountability loop, and that provides kind of that representation for accountability.
But when the board says that, we're one district, SELPA, where the CEO is the superintendent. So we already have like a system of accountability that's written real clearly in our policies and procedures. But he or she can delegate things, and something's happening in there, and the knowledge of that person. I don't know what you do, Leonard. You know, maybe you're that person now, and make sure that everything gets delegated appropriately so that the information is clear on what exactly is supposed to be done. Because it's amazing how information not being clear can just screw things up at sites. I've had some parents complain to me lately of some very serious things at some sites that show the principal doesn't understand the IDEA, or something's really wrong. And then when he's complaining about it, there's been more of an attitude of, well, let's see if we can just kind of cover it up. That has never worked. It never works. It always gets out. So, you know what I mean? That kind of technique is still around, and I would love to see it disappear because it's cheaper if it goes.
Yeah.
To answer Sean's question about where the issue is, for me, the issue is that nothing will happen unless there's alignment at a very top level. And for my experience, there's a brokenness in that alignment at the very top level. Right. So at the board, the superintendent, and especially with the ELT underneath that is lacking right now. And so administration is, in this context, is dealing with aligning everybody in that regard.
So more of a leadership.
Sean, and for clarification, many of us have felt that special ed has been kind of the stepchild of the district and hasn't been included in the discussion at the top level, and it has always been wrong. It continues to be wrong. They need to be at the table. We're a major component of this district, and they cannot talk about inclusion in a classroom until they talk about special ed being included at an administrative level. It is just totally wrong.
I have a question regarding the items that remain. We have homeschool at every school, and this group indicated that encompassed inclusion and continuum of services, and we also have inclusion. Are these similar enough? Do they need to be separate? Is under inclusion, can the concept of homeschool at every school live, or does it need to be apart?
It should, but it does not happen because a lot.
No, we're not talking about what is happening now. We're looking into the context of the future. Yes, Ruth Ann.
Why don't, by the fact that they have up their continuum of services, why doesn't that become the label, and then homeschool at every school and inclusion would be incorporated under that?
No? I'm hearing some no's. What is
I
it?
think that the word inclusion needs to be at the all-encompassing word here. And I think that we need to, I really believe that from the special education viewpoint, that we should all be speaking in terms of inclusion all the time. If we're going to talk about being I keep hearing, well, we feel like we're the stepchild, we feel like we're not, even at an administrative level, we're not part of the discussion. What we need to say is the discussion is that this is all of us. We need to stop speaking in terms of encroachments. We need to stop, which literally means intruder. The word encroach means intrude. We need to speak in terms of, we are talking about all of us. We're not talking about splintering. We're not talking about, if this happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. This is an inclusive community. It involves every single one of us, and every one of our interests should be in our unified goal, which is to include all of our children in all of our schools.
Okay, so
Inclusion should be the center of this discussion.
so with that, how does the group feel about inclusion as the heading, homeschool at every school, and continuum of consistent services living under that?
Could somebody define homeschool at every school so that we make sure we're all thinking about it in the same way? So the group that wrote it?
Whoever put it up.
Homeschool at every school.
Homeschool used to refer, they've changed the term. Homeschool used to be just, it is the school that you belong to by your residence, your address.
So we're saying
It's been changed to school of residence.
You shouldn't have to, as a student, you shouldn't have to travel outside your home geographic area to get the
so I
services
just want
that
to
you
make
need.
sure that everybody has that definition in their head, that it's every school has a continuum of services to support all student needs.
And I think that is a much better definition. Inclusion is part of a continuum.
Wait, hold on, one person at a time.
Yeah.
You have to
You're-
feel like you're part of it.
Tony.
Okay,
One
but
person at a time.
inclusion is part of the continuum and only one part of the continuum. And we must have the continuum available because some children have different needs from some students that are in an inclusion class.
I haven't seen for any member of the CAC come into my home school for my in my hometown and fight for a home school for every school for my children. So until the people that are willing to stand up and support the families that with the same language that we're using here in the field, then these are just hollow words. To me, homeschool at every school, what does that mean? Well, if you can't be part of your homeschool, then and you can see that there's a situation. There's definitely an elephant in the room. I know it. You can see that there's a situation in which a child is clearly being pushed out of his school. Then the support should be there. It should be there. It should be there. It shouldn't be one family fighting against a single school. But it should be a whole community coming together and saying, look, we're not going to accept this in this school or in any school in our district. And that needs to come from inside.
Okay,
I believe that is actually the
Accountability
concept.
starts
I believe that's the concept that that particular group was advocating for.
Right. First,
That's exactly.
But inclusion is a much stronger word. It has a much more universal design, and it is the language that's being used in the field. When we start to split, we start to bring other ideas into it. They don't make sense, and not every child is going to be able to go to their home school.
But that's what a continuum of services means. Inclusion is one part of the continuum of services, which goes from a child being in a regular ed classroom to a child being in a hospital setting. So that is the continuum of services, which inclusion is one part of that.
We have Mr. Albanese and then here, and then I think Mike here.
If I can.
Okay. There we go. Microphone.
I'm sorry you don't have a nameplate. I hear your passion.
Please don't use that word. Passion is usually the first word that is used.
We need to allow him to respond.
It's
not passion.
The reason, one of the challenges I think in a single district SELPA is that the continuum of services in a larger SELPA, when we talk about low incidence services, they're set up by the SELPA, and that's why SELPAs were formed, was to bring school communities together to form a continuum of services so that those districts could have areas where they serve students with special needs, especially in the area of low incidence or special programs. The challenge in a single district SELPA is we don't have an outside SELPA setting up those programs, so we have to start to do it as a community. And I think that's the challenge of this group, is to look at the continuum of services that we need to set in place to serve all students in this district, and at the same time keep the community that's present in the room and that we're trying to develop systems to serve. And I think that's the challenge. But I think we have to recognize that without a strong continuum of service, and we said this at the beginning, we will not be able to provide services to all children. And if it's just left to every service at every school, there will be children who go unserved. And as a special education administrator, I have a hard time leaving children out. And so I look to this committee to come up with a strong continuum of service so that we can serve the children in this community.
Next.
We've talked a lot about continuum of services, but I don't see it listed as a category. And maybe one of the things that we should think about is that as a category, and then under the continuum of services would be homeschool, continuums, inclusion to specialized services continuums. So, I mean, that's what we're really talking about. We're saying that throughout the district, there should be all services that all students require. And we know that students are going to require different services for their own needs. Some of those, hopefully most of those, can be supported in their homeschool environment. But there may be a need for outside specialized supports that the homeschool is unable to offer.
I'm sorry, no, Hermont.
I see us dancing around a little bit, and we're all wanting to put our hand on the nerve, and I know we're dancing around. We're trying to create categories, and yet many of these words have different definitions depending on who's looking at it and why you're looking at it. I mean, I'll just, transition. If you ask somebody from the government, somebody from that helped create the law, transition is K-3 to the school system, and then out of the school system when you're leaving the school system. That's what they think of transition. Then you might ask a teacher what transition is. Then you go down and you ask a parent what transition is. And in my case, as a parent, transition is like every few minutes when I'm trying to transition my son who has autism from one task to another. You might then in between the two extremes you have transition of those of us that have special needs children. We want to know who the teacher for next year is going to be. Sometime in the next few months, it helps us to know so that we can prepare in the transition. Mm-hmm. And so transition is huge, mm-hmm. and in many ways, and not just the legal mandate way. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping as we create these categories, and when I think of administration, I think of oversight. And maybe oversight should be the category. I don't know, because everybody should fall under oversight and implementation. I mean, we're talking about. I know the purpose. We're trying to put all the different recommendations that have been made into these categories, and I understand they fall under multiple categories, but I keep going back. I feel like we're dancing around because I see some wanting to talk about also the obstacles, which I know have been on our agenda for the last 4 meetings, and yet we haven't really gotten into the obstacles. I know Sharon, that you are also wanting us to think about outside of the box and to think about what we want to do ideally. Where would we want to be, right? What's the ideal situation? So I like starting there. I like starting at where do we want to be, and then now what do we need to do to get there? Mm-hmm. And so maybe a little bit of my frustration is like us spending so much time in the different little categories, and I mean, I'd want the procedure to, for you to proceed, but I want us also to not forget that we're talking the big pictures that we're talking about are our culture. Mm-hmm. We're talking about changing a culture, and that's in everything. We're talking about inclusion, including. I'm not talking about my son only, or the parents who are fortunate enough to be at a meeting to advocate, because many special needs parents, they are, the kids are in group homes, or the parents are, they're separated, they're single parents, they have their hands full. So the decisions that get made at the CAC level, all the hard work that has been done for many years to carve out the voice of the parent, it's not just for the individual parents that are sitting here at the table, it's to create the change that is needed down the road. Because our kids are going to be probably long gone from this district by the time some of this gets implemented. I mean, I look at some of the, I'm looking at, and I know I'm going on, but it's important for me to say this because I missed two meetings that I had previously had made. I attended the Students First event. Think that, Students First, studentsfirst.org. The students come first, and it happened to be on the night of our second meeting here. But there were people that came into our community, into Los Angeles, to talk about. Putting students first. Wow, what, Anyways, I'm looking at a document here from 10 years ago. And, the audit, the task force audit from 2000, right? May 2000. And I look at it, and it says things like, we'll commit in 5 years. We'll commit to becoming an inclusive home community school for all students within 5 years. All right, so, one, we know it didn't happen, right? Two, even just the verbiage, how, the mincing of the words and the creation of all this, whatever it is, we'll commit to becoming within 5 years. I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me. It means, down the road, I will stop drinking, and in the meantime, here I'm going to pour the alcohol out of my cabinet, and then I'm okay now. No, there are deep wounds in this school district. There are deep wounds, and I think we've uncovered. We're starting to realize that people are being a little more honest about the wounds, because if we don't talk about the wounds, if we don't talk about where you're cut, where you're bleeding, where, how high your blood pressure is, how are we going to treat it? We can't treat it unless we know what the wounds are. And it needs to be a comprehensive change that needs to happen in this district. And I'm talking that it's change that people are afraid, they're dancing around. We're dancing around about the change. It's change that we're talking about. We're talking about contract changes. We're talking about making sure people are on board. If they're not on board, what accountability are we going to have to make sure that the person that is in that seat is not taking up space and is actually accounting and is able to account for what we're wanting. So, anyways.
Herman, I don't disagree with you at all, but just to kind of get back to
it was actually Leonard.
It didn't seem like we were going in any order. It just seemed like people were talking. So I'll go back to seeing order. Maybe we need to return to the rules that we originally set up that first night and remind ourselves of those.
Remind ourselves of the ground rules. If anyone does not have notes regarding the ground rules, please let me know. But Leonard was the actual last person who was up. I'm sorry, and then Mr. Costello, then Ruth. So what happens is when people just jump in, that becomes a challenge.
We wanted to get us back to the continuing services that we're talking
about. Yeah, and this is why I wrote it. Yes.
What I was going to more suggest is more of that's why I think the culture is important, that it has to be up there, whether it's culture, mission statement, philosophy, or whatever you want, but that's what should be driving this whole force. Looking at inclusive schooling is more of the terminology of using, because inclusion is very difficult to even define. I mean, look how much time it took us to even look at that part. IDA does not even define it. State regulations does not define it. We're trying to do an attempt so we can start defining it and then be able to go to those processes. But then thinking of inclusive schooling should be looking at every single area of how all the services are going to be provided, because that's how it's all based on, is least restrictive.
I'm looking at it. I'm thinking umbrella.
It's umbrella.
Next person.
And, oh, wait a minute. I'm not
Go ahead.
Sorry. And the one thing that I have a lot of problems with, and I brought this up before, is I do not understand why we have a class that's called inclusion and a class that's called general ed. It's the same thing. And to me, I still cannot wrap my head around that. It doesn't make any sense. So it's like, it's general ed. That's what it is. And then they have like certain numbers. Oh, only this number can go in there. It's like, no, that's not what inclusion is. So it just shows within our district, we're not there yet. I mean, some of our schools, they're getting close. They're moving along more in an integration kind of a thing, but we got a long process to go. I mean, if we fully adopt this whole process, it's a big shift. It's going to take between 5 and 7 years. It's going to be a long time. But I think even what Herman was saying, I mean, we're hearing the obstacles as we're talking. You know, there is a lot of obstacles. There is a lot of trust issues. There's a lot of, building the relationships. So at least we're making, there's some step forwards, and I think that's really good, and that should be actually acknowledged.
Yeah, the very fact that each of you are in the room, each of you has had your own experiences. Each of you have had your own disappointments. Each of you have had, your own form of even heartache related to special ed and PUSD. But the fact that you are here in this room, knowing that an environment has been created for you to bring it to the table so that we can, if there's a moment that you need to talk it through, to get it out, so that we can then all learn from it and move forward. This is a plus. There are many school districts I've been in. This conversation would never take place. It would simply be business as usual, and we would continue on. And one of the first things that Leonard and I discussed when I agreed to actually come on board and work with the group was that the parents would need to have an equitable stand and stake. That was one of the criteria to be involved. And why is that? Just because. I mean, that's the way to do it. If you're going to create something that is going to stand the test of time until it's evaluated, this is not something that's going to be here 10 years from now. There should be a group in place after the task force is done that continues to evaluate and monitor. That is how you ensure that your organization is staying in tune and on task and in touch, is there's this constant evaluation period. Now, yes, there are 10 audits on record. It's frightening. It is. It's frightening. There are 10 audits on, but the thing is, some of those items in those audits have been implemented. Were they celebrated when they were implemented? Probably not. But those were big steps. Some of those items were implemented. And now we're saying, look, we're going to be an open book with this. We want combination of stakeholders come together and tell us what we need to do. Now, do I say that everything that you recommend is going to be done? No. My husband told me he wants to buy a 64-inch TV. Sorry. But the fact is, I know that when the house can accommodate it, and he has space. Yeah, exactly. But when, anywhere but in my living room. But there is a time that will come where things that you have said and have documented and have made recommendations about will be appropriate to insert into a plan.
So your husband has a chance of getting that TV at some
He's
point?
got a chance as soon as I get a bigger house. No, we have Mike Costello here.
Real briefly, I agree with Herman. You have to acknowledge the wounds that are there in order to get past them. And if you look at the CAC statement on the Special Ed Task Force, the first thing on that agenda was openly discussing and frankly acknowledging the divisions that exist so we can get past them and move forward in a productive manner. I agree with that. That said, no parent should be fighting with anybody, whether it's the district, whether it's with another district. And I don't think it's, I don't think vilifying the CAC is an appropriate place to start when, from Herman's days and before Herman's days, everything that's gone into getting us here to this table today has been to move things forward. And parent against parent is certainly not the issue and certainly not the right way to proceed. With Leonard, we're certainly not there yet. I agree completely. And as it relates to this conversation specifically, we can't assume general knowledge or general terminology is going to get us where we need. Because we're not there yet, because we're so broken as a system, we need to be very concrete and very specific in all of these things. And as it relates to homeschool or inclusion or continuum of services, the way I read these, the goal is that every child is welcome at every school. So continuum of services for me does not address that, because we can have a continuum of services within the district, but that means I'm going all the way over here to get one thing, then coming way back over here to get another thing. So for me, the classification would be, it's not succinct, but all students, every school, and under that, it's that would be identifying an inclusion model, but also having a continuum of services for those students that need more than an inclusion setting.
Bruce. And then, no, Ruth, here, and then here.
Okay,
Yes.
back to
Then
the
we move on.
continuum of services, whatever that label is in a picture map. If we are able to agree on whatever that label is, inclusion, transition, pre-K, and ESY would all be incorporated under that big umbrella, whatever that label is that we can agree on.
Thoughts? Next. Here and then here.
10 years of audits, I call 10 years of echoes. Okay? We've been hearing this in the language. I have to me personally, I find it difficult to change the language of inclusion to something else. If you want to call it something else as under that umbrella, call it something else under that umbrella. To change the phrasing to homeschool, to this new term, to me is to say this: how many of us have gone in, parents? I don't know how many years of IEPs you've been through, so I don't know what your experience is. I've been dealing with the IEP process for more than 20 years. I know the difference between an objective that is restating the same tired objective that hasn't been a goal that hasn't been met for the last 5 years, as opposed to stating the objective in very, very clear terms and working towards it. We don't have a definition of inclusion. Maybe we need to have one. My children have been placed in schools that have been called inclusive for years, and yet there was not a definition here of inclusion. This was something I learned only 2 months ago. This is something I had absolutely no idea of. If we're going to look at calling it homeschool at every school or whatever this very, very cumbersome phrase is, which is hard to remember, as opposed to a very simple term, which is inclusion or inclusive education, then what I think we run into the danger of doing is not acknowledging those echoes of everybody, those 10 years of echoes, the echoes of the people that have come before us, that have been trying to get the same thing that we're trying to come to here, which is to get all of our children into a place where they feel like they belong to the school, and that the school feels that the children are part of their school. If I use the term
I
fight,
need you to wrap it up.
if I use the term fight, it's a vernacular that I use. If you walk in my shoes, then you can correct my language. Until you do, until you stand alone, then you can't correct what we have had to do.
I need you to wrap it up.
I'm moving as fast as I can, but I also need your time.
Okay, you've got about a minute, though.
Are you telling me as a parent that I need to rush through my thought, or are you going to let me collect it and finish it?
No, what I'm going to ask you to do is if you can wrap it up a little quicker in the next 60 seconds.
I'm trying to, but every time you interrupt, you break my line of thought.
Okay, you've got 60 seconds.
I don't think it's a good idea to change the word inclusion. I think that it dismisses all the hard work of all the people that came before us and all of the studies. I agree. It's a shame that we have 10 years of studies that say the same thing, but we need to acknowledge that inclusion has always been at the root of many of the problems, that the children are not accepted. And we've got to break through. We have to change. Not talk about paradigm shifts, not talk about accountability. Accountability begins with each of us. I'm accountable for the things that I do and say. And I accept the things that I do and say. We all have to be accountable. We can't just say the person that's going to be held accountable is at the top. Every one of us has to accept accountability.
Okay. Two things. One of the goals of the task force is to create a definition of inclusion. And the other night when you were here, you saw the beginning of that. A subcommittee has been working on it and will continue to work on it, to refine it.
And I know it's a long process. I understand.
Number two, I did not hear this group say they wanted to use another word in place of inclusion. Again, one of our goals is to create
bring it
comprehensive pictures
together.
And so by having a heading, there's still area for the others to live underneath with the information there, with the plan for that particular item under a particular heading. We are all in agreement that professional development is incredibly important. There are about 18 bullet points that live under professional development, each and every one of them important. It's just we felt it's too cumbersome for presentation, and it certainly would not be a comprehensive plan for each one of those bullet points to live on their own. That actually does take away from some of the accountability for implementing it. So that is my 2 cents. And then here?
All I wanted to do was to clarify what we're doing right now is just labeling headings, right? That will include everything and there will be there'll be like subgroups of each heading.
Yes.
So this is not like a be all, end all. All this is to identify what's the most important groups and then everything under that as part of.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we're doing. That's all we're doing.
We're not changing
We're
language.
not doing anything else.
We're not changing
Okay.
terminology.
Great. Okay.
That is
Just
it.
so everybody in the room understands that's what we're doing right now.
Yes.
Cool.
Okay. This takes us back. We've had input from everyone in the room. Where were we? We were here.
I just wanted to get us back on track.
Thank you. There was a recommendation that you have continuum of services and then types of services that are listed underneath. How does the group feel about that? There is a recommendation that we have inclusion as its own category. There's a recommendation of the homeschool at every school and then have inclusion continuum of services underneath that. Yes.
This just dawned on me for a second, but RTI, inclusion, as Leonard said, inclusion is general ed. Maybe we need to have a category that says general ed supports, or general education supports to specialized supports? Because RTI falls under it, inclusion falls under it, 504 falls under it, transitions may fall under it also.
School.
Does the group support that?
Yeah, then there's like 5 bullets.
I have a problem with that. My only problem with
all
that
called
is that
school?
when we made the definition of inclusion.
It's all called school,
Here,
right?
I'm sorry, hold on.
I had a question about it.
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to make certain that, Sean, you were all done.
Yeah, I just to make sure everybody knows what I said. I just said supports for general education,
So I'm saying, like, it includes all that.
which, by the way, is what special ed is supposed to be. But we forgot about that between 1974 and now.
Okay, and Monica?
Oh, I just wanted to say that, as far as I know, in the last 2 days, we didn't finish because we got home late on the one night and we didn't get a chance to finish it. But I think our thinking was that we didn't want to be isolating out different types of ways students are included, because the word inclusion by definition means everyone. Maybe I have that wrong. Mike or somebody maybe can fill me in, but that's why because otherwise you'd have to pull out the 504 people, you have to pull out the people who have just maybe some accommodation for this reason or that reason. You'd have to pull out all kinds of people and mention them all, and then you might as well mention the IEP people, when in reality we were trying to put a definition that would change, we hoped, at least I hoped, would change the culture of thinking that all students weren't just this group, but belonged. Because, now if you go to the local high schools, it's really scary. You'll see, the black kids on one half of the lunchroom and the white kids on the other. I mean, we don't want some kind of situation like that where everybody, I think it would help in general if we get a definition that includes everyone, and nobody's allowed to isolate anyone.
And I believe that the entire group is certainly in support of what you're
Okay,
saying.
I just
but
wanted
we
to
have
make
to
sure.
we have to keep the definition and then what the definition looks like
Exactly.
as two
Okay.
separate things.
Alrighty,
So
thank
the
you.
definition exists as
Okay.
what it is.
I just wanted to
and
make
then
sure my other two
what it
counterparts.
looks like is what it appears to be in a plan. So
Okay.
we have this hand, Surface, Mike, here.
Yeah, all I wanted to say is it doesn't separate anyone. It's including everyone. That's the whole idea of having these topics with bullets below each one. We're ensuring that everyone is included. It's not separating anyone. By what we're doing is having an opportunity to include more people as opposed to separating people. And no one's being left out. We're like, you know what I'm saying? Like more people we're having the opportunity to include more people by having this one topic heading and then the many bullet points under. There's no be-all and end-all to this one topic heading. It's merely a topic heading that we can add things to, multiple bullets to.
Okay. Here, and then back to Costello and Albanese. Okay, Costello?
My only concern with supports to general education is acknowledging what Leonard said before. We're clearly not there yet. And that's my concern. If we were there yet, I'd be fine with it. But right now, I think, in my opinion, supports for general education is too broad of a subject, too broad of a heading that allows people to hide and say that doesn't refer to me. Homeschool every school, I don't care whether we use that terminology or not, but the concept of homeschool every school makes it a lot more difficult for people to hide and say that doesn't apply to me, because every school is responsible, hence every teacher at every school is responsible.
Next.
I'd just like to say that when the Inclusion Definition Committee met, one of the things we talked about was having the definition be an evolving definition, so that as people gained more acceptance of the concept, that definition would grow to be more inclusive. I like Mike's idea of homeschool every school continuum of education. I like that because it encompasses everything we've been talking about. It also keeps at the forefront the discussion I think we need to continue to have. I don't think we're going to end that. I hope we don't end that discussion today. I hope that is an ongoing discussion that we continue to have, because then we can start to come to some common ground. And I like that because it keeps the prize in front of us. It keeps the discussion in front of us, right in our face.
Ruth, Sean, Leonard.
I like the idea, too, of homeschool every school because it changes the paradigm of isolating special ed in different schools as opposed to all schools. And I think it also embraces the current dialogue with regard to funding about busing, and that choice schools may now have to make choice decisions about getting their kids to those locations. So homeschool, to me, meaning neighborhood or school of residence, becomes even more important for the dialogue to resonate in every parent and not just those of special ed or those of general ed.
Okay. Who is next?
I think I was. I said supports to general ed because I wanted to bring the general education population into the picture here so that they aren't left out. That's one thing. The other thing that we should remember, or think about at least, is that we are a SELPA besides just being a district. And most SELPAs the reason why a SELPA exists is to make sure that there are enough resources out there to meet everybody's needs. So you might have one child with visual impairment at Sierra Madre School and one more child with visual impairment at another elementary at Don Benito, but then you can't create separate programs for just one individual. And so you may end up I think somebody said it on the other side, missing a group of kids because you're saying it all has to be in one place. That may be something that we come to agreement around if that could financially occur. But my original reason for bringing in the idea of supports to general ed is so that general education realizes that they're part of the instruction of all students.
I think having.
I'm sorry. Who was
I'm
next?
sorry.
It's me.
Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I think what we're talking about, I think that it is a paradigm shift. It's really realizing that special education is a service. It's not a place. First, you would try with your homeschool, exhaust your services. But there's going to be times for some kids we have to move along for more restrictive environments. So we probably will have some specialized programs at different schools. We will just have to have that. It's the same way as a student if they're moving into a non-public school. So it's always based on the need, but I think that we have to do a systemic change. I mean, it's what I'm more looking at is the general ed population that's out there of looking at it. We basically are going to provide some recommendations, and then hopefully the other groups will actually adopt it. I mean, sounds like most of us are always within the same page, but if you think of the district, we have 18,500 students, and only 2,200 of them, or 2,500 of them are special ed identified. So, I mean, that's where the big shift is going along.
Identifies the big term here.
That's a big term, and that's something we have to look at.
Who was first? My back was turned. Hermand or Judith? Here.
I just wanted to say financially, also the issue of having a student at Sierra Madre and one at San Rafael with vision problems is a huge burden to the district because you need braillers, you need support staff that deal with visually impaired students. And having been part of West San Gabriel Valley SELPA for many years, back in the old days, we had in Arcadia one of the vision programs, and the students from the host SELPA came to Longley Way School to receive services as visually impaired. And they got extraordinary services, and only because they were in one school, not all over West San Gabriel Valley. You cannot have a program that meets every child's needs and IEP goals at each individual school. I mean, it's not productive for the kids. It's not financially feasible for the district. So I just think you need to keep that in mind.
Okay, we need to wrap this up. We have two more. 1, 2.
I think we need to keep in mind that the, low incidence, like somebody that needs a Braille service, that should be the exception. When we're talking about changing culture, when we're talking about accommodating a child that maybe, say, has behavior issues, when there's the culture of a school is such that the kid doesn't get selected and then removed, and unless that child has parents who are attorneys or know how to navigate the system, will they get the services there for their child at that school? We should be talking about all the kids that don't have the parents that are attorneys. That when the culture of a school changes to accommodate, say, a child like mine, I'll just say my child, which is not, it's not easy, but there were people that thought he wouldn't be able to read, and he's reading. So there are many kids in that when you stretch the net all the way out to my son, nobody's going to fall through it. That net's going to catch everybody. So when you train that teacher, Mr. Albanese, or when you guys train everybody at your school, and you as a leader of your school are creating a culture where, no, we're going to capture every kid. Any kid, every school. I think the idea, the idea of the homeschool, I think there's a little confusion because public schools are, they are starting to offer homeschool programs. I know a principal in this school district who's homeschooling their child, but through the school district. So they're going through the K12.com website, the Kava, right?
It carries a different connotation when you hear those words.
And this community, Pasadena, everybody knows, Sierra Madre, Pasadena, we have a pretty deep culture in education. That's why we have all these great institutions. Education is very important to this community, which is why a lot of them, there's people that homeschool. And so that's not bad. Even the school districts are recognizing, but I just wouldn't want homeschool to be misconstrued thinking, oh, this school is also offering homeschooling. So let me suggest the idea of having something like any kid, every school, or
any student, every school.
Any student, every school, something like that.
How are we feeling about that? Any student, every school?
I like that.
Yeah, I like every student, every school.
Every
I like that.
Every student?
Any student, every school.
Okay, I'm going to choose.
That sure sounds very inclusive, doesn't it?
Yes. Isn't that interesting?
Great clarification. The only thing I was going to add is
Yes, Mike?
the low incidence and specific programs that has been brought up. Yes, it may not be financially viable for everything, but if you'll notice, our group did take that into account. Having the overall goal being this idealistic, we can make exclusions or exemptions as needed. But
Okay.
I like the rearrangement.
I want to congratulate you on having an incredibly difficult conversation. It was a very difficult conversation for a lot of people, and yet you stuck with it, you listened to each other, you talked through it, you heard the value in what one another said, and that is what makes this a place that is going to put forth something that's going to be beneficial. Because when you stick through the difficult conversations, there's nothing wrong with conflict. You manage it, conflict can be good. You don't manage it, conflict has people standing up and walking out of the room. That is not where we're going. We're going to hear each other. It may be difficult sometimes, but it's the benefit of one another's experiences. Your children, your students, your stakeholders. That is what's going to create a difference. I want to make certain that somehow, though, culture stands out in here. Now, we all understand that in order for each of these, there's going to be a cultural shift of some type that takes place. And it's either the group decides, there'll be a prefacing statement regarding culture, or really one of the overarching heading for all of this could be cultural change with respect to special ed in PUSD? I leave that up to you. It's not a decision we have to make today, but you do need to know that that aspect of culture needs to be spoken to in some way.
I would suggest that we review the strategic plan of the district, because I know that when
there's a culture statement that's read by the board.
Right.
Yes.
So we could look at that and see if that needs to be refined to be inclusive of special ed. But I think in that wording, it was comprehensive. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that would be that overarching.
Okay, time check, it's about 12:23. 12:23. You've done a fantastic job. I don't want anyone to quit on me now. We have like few steps to go. Pre-K is a category of its own, are we saying? Where did we say it went?
I would go under general, that classification we just did, every school, every kid, pre-K would be under as part of that, wouldn't it?
Do all schools have pre-K programs?
For special ed, for general ed.
Yeah, for either.
I think.
Okay, we've got a question here.
I'm just wanting to make sure. It was my understanding that the regional center was providing funding, and you guys had a collaboration for that age category and even maybe a little younger. Do they have a say in
For which?
for the, like the autistic, the early intervention? Yeah.
They don't provide any funding for us.
They
give
just
them outside
they didn't give you any
services.
money. They just said, "Hey."
We have different grants out there. We have an infant grant. We have our preschool
But you
grant.
still are responsible for all.
Mhm.
Oh, well, that's too bad.
We have a little infant toddler program.
Okay, well, that's too bad then, because so it's totally up to us
Yeah,
then.
it's on
So we
us.
have to put it in our group. Okay, thank you.
Here.
My point was that many of the mandates that go along for preschool programs are different from what you have for school age K to adults programs.
Okay, so-
it may be a standalone.
Okay, all right. There was a hand here, and then Sean.
Furthering the standalone aspect of it, also a lot of problems, if they're not addressed at pre-K, if pre-K is not addressed properly, problems result that affect the entire system down the road. So,
So if not explicitly stated, a different interpretation will arise.
Yes, I
Yes.
agree.
Leonard, there are no agreements between regional center and the school district to like partially fund certain like programs like
No,
discrete
they
trial
do.
training
They
early.
may do some other stuff on the outside, but not within the district. We have an MOU like with California Children's Services, of course with County Mental Health. But so far, looking at in our MOUs, we don't have anything with regional center. But a lot of the regional centers cutting a lot of their programs, and they know it's going to fall back on the district. So that's one of the other issues that Joyce did not bring up. It's just it falls back on the school's responsibility.
Wow.
If
Yes.
I may,
Did you turn your mic on?
oh, I'm sorry. That's why it sounds the same.
Yes.
So I agree. With the preschool programs, for the children with the low incidence disabilities, those will be recognized at an earlier age, and they will get the supports. Where I feel that we do need to at least be looking at and helping to coordinate is with the preschoolers that have hidden disabilities and or disabilities that don't show up as defined. They may not be eligible for preschool programs, and it brings us back to when I discussed the SIPT. Some of the assessments are no longer children are no longer eligible for the testing after they enter school, and if we can identify them and get them supports and get them into inclusive preschool programs, whether they're other community-based preschools, it helps set that transition into the Pasadena schools once they get to the age of 5. So I just, I do think that we need to keep an eye on that group. I don't know where that fits in or falls in, but I would hate to see us put that as a parking lot thing or as I didn't hear parking lot, but I heard standalone.
No, it's here.
Yeah, and I hope that we'll keep an eye on that or figure out a way to include that group of children.
Wow, that word include just keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Was there another hand before I ask my next question? Yes.
I would just like to say that I think we are not doing an adequate job of identifying symptoms that are very apparent in preschoolers that of children who actually have hidden disabilities, and we're taking way too long to identify them and assess them and get them the services that they need, because everything worldwide says that early identification and services is mandatory for kids to be as successful and meet their potential as to the highest potential they can go. And I see that with kids with learning disabilities a lot.
Yes.
Which is why this group had assessment as a separate header, because we felt it was that important to do.
Well,
yeah.
That was the
Well, actually, this is what I did. This is what I did, because all of these charts are going to live with me for the next few days. Again, feel sorry for my husband, because
He
he
could
walks
have a
in,
TV.
He walks in. He walks in the dining room.
Sharon,
and
are you
I
telling
have
me-
charts all over?
He wanted a 60-inch TV and he gets chart paper?
But not taking up nearly as much space.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, what I did is, in the area of evidence-based assessment/practices, I will reference the bullet points as well for pre-K, so that we can make certain that gets represented. Okay? I think I may have two more questions to go. We have parents. Parents as their own category. What is are we developing a recommendation for parents? Or was it about the communication, the dissemination of information? Okay.
We viewed parents as falling part of the collaboration aspect.
I was wondering if collaboration might be a better place for it?
Yes.
Okay, because we're saying that parents are a part of the team. Okay, so parents will be moved. Parents. Alrighty.
Can I ask a question about one of our items? 4.1 interim placements for NPS. I didn't quite understand what that meant.
We may have to go back to the source document to review it. What is the audit number?
11.
4. Oh, no, 4.
Okay, the audit number is 4.
I was just curious if anybody remembered what that referred to. Because I was thinking it was foster care and group homes and LCIs, but I may be wrong.
Well, it's
If I remember right, we were looking at kids that were first coming in and just automatically being placed into NPSs or automatically placed into special day classes without, in a sense, an assessment process around their needs being met before that.
here. It's audit 4. It's our audit 4.
So what was the placements based on?
I need to look at your notes.
Previous data, or previous IEP?
You have all
So
your
it
notes.
wasn't really clear where.
It'll take us just a moment.
Well, I didn't mean to cause a huge problem.
Okay.
Was
Yeah.
it a good question?
What's the title? What's the title of the audit? Does anybody have it?
You
handy?
could go
Yes.
back as far as the Barber report, it's in there.
Audit 4. I need someone to locate the original document that I gave you that has the corresponding audit name with the audit number. I had it. I was actually sharing it with someone else.
Yeah.
Audit 4
It's-
is the
It's April 2005.
The FICMAT.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
the
FICMAT, the
FICMAT
District
one.
Transportation and Special Ed Review. So if you look in the back in the recommendations section,
Because they have to take the money anyway. Have any busing money? Remember, something happened with busing money.
yeah, that's kind of why I created that table, because I knew that there would be a moment we would need to go back and find where it was.
What does it say?
Anyone find
NPS?
it?
Yeah. Does it say NPS?
You may read.
Oh. Oh, thick mat. Okay. Oh, my leg is killing me. And she wants to know what they meant by NPS and the FICMAT audit?
Oh, I found it.
That's about when we
That-
got sued. This district
Yeah.
there was a class action lawsuit.
There
against
was
the
a
district
big
because
one.
of the placement in the home.
Yeah.
And-
In the
and-
group homes.
in the-
Group
yeah,
homes.
I think it was the,
You know,
not the Sycamores, not 5
It wasn't 5 acres.
I think it was automatic placement of the emotional disturbed kids.
No, Hillside's
Hillside.
Hillsides, Hillsides.
It was
What
Hillside.
that lawsuit was, I just didn't know how it applied to that item.
See
I'm
directly.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's on page 14 if you're looking through it, through the report. And that's what it's looking at. It's consider providing a school setting that meets the needs of these out-of-home students.
So this is related to LCI Center.
Yeah, it's looking at a student who has an IEP who transfers into our district that has a non-public school placement. When we look at an IEP for a 30-day placement, we have to do what's comparable services.
Right.
So if it comes from another district, so that was where it was going. It was just as, oh, they have an NPS, we throw them in an NPS. But it comes to the district, and if we have a program that can service the student, then we can place that student in that program, which is Jim's program. If they're for emotionally disturbed or something that requires a non-public, it doesn't have to be emotionally disturbed. It could be other health, specific learning. It all depends. It's not just on disabilities.
You're losing your
but
voice.
it's looking at.
Oh, it's gone.
I
It's
lost my
gone.
voice.
Oh, yeah, you shouldn't be made to talk.
It's okay.
I'm a slave driver.
Goes
Mom.
away. Yeah, she's a slave.
Thank you.
So,
I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what it was.
Okay, thank you. Last question. Extended school year. Extended school year. Is this its own item, or is this a part of a larger plan? Oh wait, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
It's part of the continuum or whatever we've decided of every kid, every school. It's not every kid, it's the IEP, but it's the,
There's specific things that allow students to be eligible for extended school year.
but
There's
isn't that-
criteria for
Right.
being eligible. It's either standalone or it doesn't even belong on the list.
Oh, then
The group tells
I
me.
think so, it's part of services, so.
It's
Standalone?
Transition?
Yeah, because. what
transition, maybe.
Does it have something to do also with losing your abilities over the certain amount of time? Yeah, regression.
I personally think it should be standalone. It was a big issue, Ruth Ann, at our first meeting, was it our first meeting that we talked about summer school?
Yeah, I remember it was very important in that first meeting. We talked about it for some time. So a standalone, or as someone said, transition. Transition?
Transition.
Because that's where you see like regression.
However, it's supposed to be an extension of the school year, which is not transition.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a continuation of
Same
services.
It sounds,
Or sometimes it's not even the same IEP.
Sean?
It could be seen as a further form of monitoring of the student, or it could be seen as I know we're not using the continuum of service, but it is to extend services into further
Actually,
into the school year.
we do have the continuum of services under another heading. So, I mean, do we add ESY in the same area where continuum of services lives?
Well, I would
That's
see
where
it
it should go.
in that
Okay.
direction.
The discussion was over summer school being a meaningful experience and being beneficial to the child, I think.
Okay.
Am I right?
Yes, I remember that.
What's the new label, though, of what used to be continuation of services?
It's still continuum of services.
Oh, it still is.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry. It's under the every student, every school.
Yeah, well, that was the discussion. ESY is not every student, every school. It's
Okay.
a defined,
But every student that
classification.
would have that would make the requirements for that would have access to it.
How about standalone, since we're having such a tough time
Yeah.
finding a category for it?
Standalone.
My thinking is that they probably wanted it on that list so they can develop specific policy and procedure for it, which is somebody who helps put ESY together every year. I vote for that, to do that, because we're always begging. So this would at least have a policy and procedure that the board would accept. Then maybe we'd be first dibs versus last dibs, which would really help.
All righty, congratulations. We have gone from 3 pages to 11 plus our standalone category, which I will encompass. Give us all a hand. We do have parking lot, yes, yes. And parking lot, we've got 6.2 here. I do need someone to pull out their sheet so that we can take a quick look at these. We actually have 6.2 here and 6.2 over there.
Right, we have 6.2 here.
6.2 was popular. Yeah. All right, let's take a look at 6.2.
That was reducing the instructional assistance from 6 hours to 5 hours.
And from the CSEA standpoint, that is not good.
Guys, be careful. You're inside bargaining. Don't go there.
Yeah, I think this may be
Don't
an
go there.
inappropriate environment for
Yeah.
it.
Right, but that we had under collective, UTP, CSEA, our group sectioned out those things that needed to go elsewhere, so that's why it was brought up.
Okay, so are we agreeing that 6.2 is not to be discussed, is not going to be discussed by this group?
Yes.
So I'm just going to
So, Sharon, may I say something?
Yes.
And I'm not in any way part of the negotiating team, but as the chair of the CAC and recommendations that we've brought forth to the board for numerous years, we did talk about career ladders for the aides and for, we talked about not only
Retention plans,
not
right?
only retention and training. We brought forth the idea of, because we kept training people and they'd go out the door, and then we'd have to retrain and start again. And so, how do we keep people that we've trained? And we talked about making sure that they got, say, benefits, and that the system didn't squeeze out the support in the classrooms.
Can I
And
ask
so, I'd like to finish my thought. So, anyways, I know we're saying that it should, it might be in the audit that talked about cost reduction. I don't remember, right? So we were talking about saving money, but it is an important. It does fall into the area of where there are obstacles that are keeping us from holding on to people that could eventually be teachers. So if they start off as an aide, we train them and then they stay in, and we give them a ladder to stay in the school system and even support them to get a degree, a teacher credential. They now, maybe on their first year, have 10 years experience working with kids, and I think there's a value to that. But is the board or the leadership in this SELPA, in this district, are we identifying that? Are we giving it value?
The career ladder thing has been under discussion for I don't know how many years, and we never seem to quite get there. I think we need to note that we have numbers of, and I don't know how many numbers, Leonard may know better than I do, or Pam, of folks who started out as instructional assistants in this district who have now become credentialed teachers. So it is a real possibility that it could be a stepping stone to people actually getting their credentials.
Yeah, personal story. My mother started as an instructional aide when I was 4. And when she retired, she had been with the school district for 27 years as a 3rd grade teacher. So, I mean, it is possible. But to take us right back to here. And we see this in many environments. I believe a fit for it is staff and hiring, but it would require an additional piece on retention. Retention, maybe succession planning or career planning, or you tell me what you want it to look like. Yes.
That would also encompass the discussion that was being, that came up regarding the speech language
Pathologists, maybe just an idea
That
like how do
would.
we hold on to our talented staff that want, that want to progress professionally,
Okay.
and how do we hold on to them when they start to meet those goals that
It sounds
that are
like
being set?
retention would work. That would cover that conversation. All righty.
I would
Question.
just like to suggest, again, knowing where we are, and we're not there by any means yet, wanting to be very specific, because retention is important, but you want to retain the right people. So how about adding the word quality staff hiring retention? So there's no, or adding the word quality or qualified or something so that we're
Okay.
specific. in that
And
regard.
competitive salaries.
Yeah, competitive salaries, that's maybe.
Okay. All righty. So that addresses 6.2. Were there any other parking lots?
We had 6.4 back here.
We also have 6.
Hold on.
6.4.
6.4. Can you tell them what page it's on? Ruth?
It's on the first page?
Bottom of page 1.
Bottom of page 1.
Yeah, include resource room programs to support underperforming students, and we were talking about the fact that resource room programs were not as important as just, pushing in to support the student in the class. So that's why we put that on a parking lot.
Okay. Other groups in agreement?
I'm not quite in agreement because I think there needs to, I don't know if there needs to be a resource room, but there needs to be some type of room that the students can go to when they're having issues. And they do have issues that would make them, problematic for a regular ed teacher if they were being included. And I'm not sure if that's such a safe room, like the rooms at Facebook.
Yeah.
Those Facebook rooms look like they would be great calming rooms. They're like lots of pillows on the floor and, lots of people dressed casually. And I'm just saying something like that at every site so that you could calm down kids that are really starting to act out behaviorally. And if you don't know the reason why it is, you need some kind of location like that. I don't know if there is one at every site. Maybe Leonard, you know? You don't know?
No.
Okay.
Speak up, Gene.
Performing, specifically it said for underperforming students. So it does bring me in my mind to an RTI category because
Okay.
that's what that's about, is making sure that those resources are not just there for special education students, but prior to becoming special education students, underperforming students have resources available to them.
And then we also had 1.1, which is right underneath that, addition of inclusive schools and diversification of inclusive programs at each school to accommodate students. We felt that was redundant.
Okay. I think we have addressed.
Yeah.
All right. Were those all of your?
Yeah, 5.1 was central office restructuring, and we felt like that's kind of been done under Mr. Diaz. Under 6.1, which is on the third page, I guess, decrease school psychologists, we voted no, but that to decrease administrative staffing, we felt had been done. And 6.3, the SDCs, 6.3 is to develop blended programs to serve SDC and RSP students at home schools, reducing transportation costs. We felt that had been incorporated.
Okay. let's go to your parking lot here.
We had two areas, but Ruth Ann already mentioned them, so.
6.1 and 6.2?
1 and 6.2.
Okay. All right. So our parking lot items have been addressed. All righty. Whew. All righty. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. We are scheduled to meet Wednesday night the 14th. On Wednesday night, I will endeavor to place all of the chart information, consolidate it. We are down to approximately 11 categories. Again, that's just incredible work from where we began. We want to start creating the framework for developing action plans. So what this means, and there's a lot that's involved with developing action plans. The first part of that is there is a worksheet that you received today. Again, part of my dining room redecoration, where the other night we did the optimal environment activity where you listed optimal environments. The only thing that's different from what you said is that after I typed the list, I sorted them in hopes that some groups would appear, and in some cases they did, in some cases they did not. So on Wednesday night, this sheet we will work on so that we can identify those characteristics, attributes of optimal environments that go along with those categories that we have identified. And then there's going to be some subcommittees formed to develop action plans. This is where you think you've worked now. This is where the real work begins. So the 14th, the 17th, the entire session will be devoted to developing frameworks for action plans. I know that you're not going to have a lot of detail between the 14th and the 17th, but if we can identify the subcommittees by the 14th, get you together, identify some resources for you to begin, then by the 17th, it'll be a working session for the entire task force.
So in general, we're going to look for action plans on each one of these?
No. What you're going to do is identify, you're going to take the optimal environment information that we developed and just match it with the category that it will fit with. It's just a jump-off point, that's all. So that you're not starting with a blank page, because we've already said that there's some things that, optimally we'd like to see. Yes?
Just a suggestion, is there a way where we could have even a rough draft of what we've outlined today in the chart paper and have it electronically sent to us so we can get a little head start?
Well, I was hoping to go out tonight.
Works for me.
No, I promise you. I think I can get it out to everyone at the latest on Monday. Okay, you already have the worksheet, so you could actually get started. That'll make us more productive when we come in the door. Yes?
As a parent, collaboration, let me rephrase. Collaboration, I think, is very important. And as I think we all do. Collaboration, from my perspective as a parent, there's not a lot. I can say it's good, we need to do it, but I'm not in the school sites and in the walls here to know how to do it. Where I'm going with this is, I'm really thankful, Jean, that you are here representing the voice of general education teachers.
And she's been here every meeting.
And what I'm suggesting is, even though no other general education teacher has volunteered to be part of this task force, would it be beneficial if we could try to find a few general education teachers that could participate to voice that perspective, specifically around developing collaboration? Because we can put forth all the things we want to put forth, but if there's not the buy-in, we're not going to get it.
Okay.
Just on dates, we probably should add it.
I'm sorry.
We should tell them about why we're adding the 17th.
You go ahead.
Just
I
so
don't
you know,
remember.
because we know we weren't going to be fully done, so that's one reason we added for that Saturday.
Everyone, we know Leonard is strained.
I'm strained enough here. We had to add the day for that Saturday for March 17th, so it could be a working group. Just so you know, I won't be here at that day. So I'm going to try hopefully get Carol. She'll be there so she can at least help out making sure everything is, so the door's open and all that fun stuff. So we'll be there. But it looks like we'll probably have to add the Wednesday, the 21st. And pretty much if you guys want to meet the following week, again, I won't be around that following week. So kind of all depends. So who knows? We might be able to finish by the 21st. I don't know. And then we can kind of go from there. Because if we want to get this presented to the board, which I think is April 20, it's 26, 27, something like that. We basically have like a few weeks where we have to get it on the agenda of everything that we are going to present. It's not as simple as we got all the information, we're like, oops, we forgot to photocopy this, we forgot to photocopy those things.
It all has
It's
to
not
be
like
there.
that. It all has to be there. Even if you see a spelling error, it goes up. So it's usually a good 2 to 3 weeks beforehand. So that's why the hope is to try to get everything done really quick before, at least if we leave spring break or that we have that 1 week. I don't remember the last final date. I think it's somewhere in the first week, I believe, is the one we have to get everything in if we want to make it to that board meeting. Or maybe that's our discussion is we're not there yet. I mean, that might be another way to go, but that's what the board was expecting, that we would come back about that time.
I also have a conflict on the 17th.
Sidebars.
I also have a conflict on the 17th. Summit View is having their transition conference.
The 21st is a site council, so Garrett and myself will be missing that meeting.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, because by Wednesday you'll have your subcommittees, we'll basically agree on what the calendar looks like and what needs to be done by when. Subcommittees, you can communicate in whatever manner you choose in the in-between, as long as we have a finished product by the date that we all agree on. Now, by finished, I mean meeting a milestone. I don't mean the entire thing all done, but meeting our goal for this time. That's what I mean. Okay, so it doesn't need to be, bound and ready for Pulitzer by a particular date. It just means that we have agreed that this is the milestone. We're going to meet by this date. And so subcommittees can meet in between. Everyone can go online, conference call, set up a Google Doc, collaborate. It is absolutely important, the collaboration aspect of this. You have been able to collaborate because you've been in the room with one another up to this point. But I cannot tell you how valuable, how important. I have worked with groups that were smaller, who were not able to make this type of progress. It is so hard for people to reduce the scope of anything because everything is important and we want to hold on to it in that manner, not realizing that if we look at it slightly differently, we can find synergy in relation with other things and leverage those relationships. Two things operating separately require two different funding sources. You find some synergy between the two, leverage that relationship. Maybe it's not as much funding, but you're able to still provide a service, a quality service, and effective service. So as you move forward, please, please, please do not be constrained by what the world looks like today. Think about how we can make the world look going forward. It's not flat anymore. And we have to convince other people that it's not flat. All right? Thank you. I have never gotten you out before 1 o'clock. So I'm going to see my son play basketball. Thank you, thank you. Have a great day. It is a gorgeous day outside.